They used to go to my church.
Really?
Yes, that's right. Both of them, actually. I could never have seen the two of them getting married, though. They just seem so incompatible. But how do you know the bride?
We went to school together. In church, as a matter of fact, for a period of time. Yes, I do happen to concur. They're so incompatible for each other, at least as I thought. I used to get into these vicious arguments throughout the years. He used to hate her, and hell, she would come running back to him every time.
Yes. I mean, the two of us ending up here together to talk about it and then being able to get together. I mean, that must be God, don't you think? I always count on God's will whenever I meet somebody new.
Yeah, that sure is something, I suppose.
Although I don't know who just you are. And come to think of it, you don't know who I am either. My name's Bill Fisher, that is. Now who are you?
That's you? You were weren't you a Sunday school teacher at one time? If I'm not mistaken, that is. My name is David Bowers.
That's really you? I haven't seen you in years, since you were a little kid. What have you been doing with yourself these days?
Just graduated from Kings Hill University last May. I got a doctorate in theology and a major in practitioner therapy.
Well, you've grown up to be such a fine young man. It's so funny. You used to come up to me after class with the most intriguing questions.
Like the one in, I think it was 1 John 4:8, stating how God is love. Yet at the same time, in 1 Corinthians, stating that God doesn't envy and that love, therefore, doesn't envy. Yet in Zephaniah 3:8, it says something about how God will consume the earth with his jealous anger.
Yes, I circled with you for weeks on that. And to think that you were only 7 finding these things, that's truly incredible. Well, I know you've proved your faith and crushed those questions by now.
Yeah, I guess so.
So, what do you want to do with your life? What field are you going into?
I was going to be a pastor, honestly, sir. I even just got an offer. But just recently, and almost to the point of being too late, I found that wouldn't be for me. So I'm looking at practicing therapy.
Well, I'd beg you to stay in pastoring. Please. I think you'd be wonderful at it. I know how you were as a kid, and I know I'm old and broken, but you can speak. You'd easily run circles around old Jason. That man would go on for ages and say almost nothing at all.
I'm out of that business now.
Well, that's just not what the world needs right now. People say the world needs more doctors. They say the world needs more blue-collar, hard-working men and pure-of-heart politicians. But I say the world needs more pastors.
I just can't. I've learned that I'd better be suited helping with therapy.
Well, as long as you feel that's where God's calling you, say, where are you going to church now?
Honestly, I'm not going to church.
Well, the doors are always open at Old Lambs Baptist. I'm still going there. Can you believe that? Well, how's your walk with God been going, son? I used to ask you all the time when you were in my class.
Have you ever looked at God and asked, why?
Why? I don't think I understand.
I have a hard time with who God is.
Well, he loves you, and you know that. That's obvious.
Well, maybe that's the case, but did he love those people, those infants, that he allowed to be killed without any mercy in 1 Samuel? I believe it's chapter 15, verse 3. Did he?
I brought a Bible with me, actually. Where was that at?
That was 1 Samuel 15:3.
Okay. Yes. And Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel, and donkey. Well, we know that God has way more of an understanding than any of us, but we know that those conquests were to destroy the wicked. God knows the conditions of those people's hearts.
What about individuals who might have been later converted? You ever considered any of this? What about those infants? They could have been taken to lovingly grow up in the society that the Israelites provided. If that would have happened, we would have fewer spirits burning in hell right now. Is that what an all-loving God would condone? Besides, wouldn't an all-loving God put a concept as primitive, as eradicating, and violence, bluntly, aside?
Well, he knows more than we do. Surely he has a plan. And those were a part of it. He knew that they would never have turned from their ways.
Then by that logic, everything is permitted, no matter how heinous the crime. It will all follow suit as God's perfect plan.
Well, not quite. God still has a set of commandments for us to follow, and we can't just take those for granted, not expecting punishment.
Disregarding the point that God should know the future, you have these laws. One of them being to not kill, or steal as a matter of fact. However, when the Israelites raided, they often killed and stole. So is God trying to preach that these commandments are fine to break as long as you have an army of people at your hand?
No, not at all. But this is what he commanded to do, and he had a reason for it. Do you even believe in God anymore?
No, I don't believe in God. Whoever, whatever he is, I don't stand by his character.
I was afraid of that. You know you're better than that. Have you lost your mind in college?
No, I just realized a couple of things.
Are you perhaps angry at God?
Respectfully, sir, how can I be angry at something I don't believe exists?
Okay, let me understand now. Give me a minute to understand your dilemma. You don't believe in God, but you've attended all of this time obtaining a doctorate in theology. Shouldn't you have more of a reason to believe?
I would say that it was my learning about the Bible and God that I realized how terrible the religion, and as a matter of fact, Yahweh as a deity, was.
How could you say that? That's the same God who loves you so much. Of course you know that. He sent his only son to die for you, and now you throw all that away?
Sir, I respect you so much. I always have. I would never attempt to disrespect you, but I know you can be honest with me, even with the most blunt questions. Have you ever read the Bible? All the way through, that is?
I've read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and a couple other parts. I've read the majority of it, but those first four are the most important. I mean, that's the gospel. It gives me my salvation. Maybe you should try looking at those ones again.
No, the whole Bible, collectively, cover to cover. Have you read it?
No, not all of it, not cover to cover. I've read a great deal of it, of course.
Your drinks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I never meant to fall away from my faith or beliefs. I don't have anything against anyone in the church, you or elsewhere.
Then what was your reasoning?
I had never read it. All the way through, that is, before. In all my years of attending a Christian school and up to my first year at Kings Hill, I had never read it all the way through. Looking back, it was almost like my professors, my teachers were scared of doing that. When I had finally read it, I realized how absurd it all was.
What about it? Go ahead.
Sir, I mean this in the most respectful way possible once again. I find the idea of an all-knowing, omnipotent, all-loving, omniscient, and omnipotent God who created the entire universe for his own pleasure to be a stupid assertion. I find it incredibly unreasonable for a God who is deemed all-loving to have created a universe in which the majority of the humans he created end up thrown in hell. In most cases, simply for just not believing in him. I realized how horrible of a character he was, and I hadn't even read half the book yet.
Now you better be careful. That would be considered blasphemy.
It seems God has more interest in his own glory than us. Wouldn't you say that's selfish?
Well, no, that's not true. Think of Nehemiah 9:17. You are a God ready to forgive, gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and did not forsake them. And think of Psalm 86:15. But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, and slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness.
Yes, but then you have a verse as convincing as, well, may I?
Yes, of course.
This is a passage in Deuteronomy 6:15 that is, I believe I can quote it even. For the Lord your God, who is among you a jealous God, and his anger will burn against you.
When I was young, like you, I didn't believe in God. I thought that the world was too done up to have someone who loves each and everything. I was in for a rude awakening, though. You see, when I was only 17, my mother was shot. A psycho, he got eyes on her, and she refused, and she paid the price. And when the cops found her, she was still there. They brought her in, and they tried really hard, and she died. A little bit later, I had been running out with, who I thought were my friends, and after that, I stopped being myself for a while. And my so-called friends, they stopped needing me. And of course, my dad wasn't there. He never was, and he was long gone. I had to work myself. I worked, and I didn't know why. I guess it was to keep living. I asked myself why. Why was I living? For what point? Finally, this man came up to me on the side of the street. He had this flag that said, "No him, no life." I asked him who this him was, and he said it was Jesus, and he explained that he loved me, and that he died for me. He asked me if I was going to Jesus when I died. I didn't know. I thought that this guy was crazy, but a part of me wanted more. On the back of his shirt, I saw the word Lamb's Baptist. I knew of this concept of hell, mostly because of pop culture. The man said something about how you can believe, and that's the only way you can be saved. And that night I was walking home. I didn't own a car at that time. And on the way down the street, I saw the sign, and I noticed this tree had fallen down on my usual route to Gray's Block. So I went around, and I took the long way home. Next morning, it was Sunday, and I woke up to find that there had been a shootout on Gray's. I know now God was looking out for me. It was just a little thing, too. I decided to show up at church. The man I was talking about was he was Pastor John. Don't you remember? We were younger then, before he crossed the river. After listening to a sermon about where the dead go and how God cared enough to get us something better, I went there. John and I talked. I didn't want to go to hell, so I went on and got saved and baptized. I have been there ever since. When I got older, I married Julie, and we had a son. It was an accident. He was, at least. After those 8 anxious months, he didn't make it. I prayed and prayed while we were at the hospital, but God was just telling me, wait, you're not ready for this. And his death made me realize that we don't have any power and that I wasn't ready. He's the one who's in control. He taught us to be extra safe and treasure life. 3 years later, he blessed me with a daughter, and she's actually a missionary now. And talking about her big brother and all the good he did for her without even making it that far. David, I lost my mother. She is probably burning in hell right now. I count it a miracle that I'm not, and that I won't. And I'm worried about you. Please, I don't want you going there.
Sir, I'm so sorry. I remember the day you gave your testimony. I was so inspired then. I had felt that as though he was there. But I realized this God just isn't. He isn't out there. So, is it your fear of death that keeps you in line? Is that what really saves you? Death. We work our whole lives for it. Perhaps, just maybe, death is our idol. Death is perhaps our God. At the very end of the path we are walking, he is there. That is more certain than any God professed by book or prophecy, and drives us more than any of them could, even if they imagine. He is the cosmic puppet master over our lives. He doesn't even have to be in constant control. He affects us simply by his existence, for by it his rule is implanted. That is that. We have limits, which is the most dreadful thing you can tell a human being. Perhaps it doesn't matter who or what made us. We're here, alive. And that's what we have our anxieties oriented to. What really matters is what ends us, sir. We fear things we do not understand. In our fear, we make an idol and call it God, a being who is impossible to understand. Death and God have more in common than they're given credit for. They both govern our lives because in the end, they decide. They make our lives meaningful by making the perceived universe meaningless. We work for all our existence just to finally confront them. Then, well, silence. That is all death has to offer. Mere nothingness. That is the horror and fear of death. Nothingness. We cannot understand nothingness, and that is why we are afraid.
But God has more.
If he did love you, and everyone as a matter of fact, he would be looking out for everyone's best interests. Maybe the reason why you're saved is because you are afraid of death and its consequences. I'm going to be honest, sir. These people who made this religion, and even to the point of those who are following it today, they all have one thing in common. They listen to the silence. They let the silence talk, even though that's not possible. Since it's not possible, people interpret it into whatever they want. That's another way you get God. That's just how it is. You tell someone to do something and they may listen depending on how much you're worth to them and they're on, but if you concern their lives' safety, and if they don't do it, then you can produce fear. An all-loving God shouldn't need fear to drive his lovers. God, or Yahweh, started out as a god of storm and war. This is why you have such a destructive group of people that he supposedly leads. They were a group of desert dwellers, raiders even. And their God was a depiction of their such robust, man-like leaders. Those who wanted to take what they wanted, no matter who had it. They wanted to keep their wives tied up and restrained, and their slaves too. That is why he claims to be loving, but has such a harsh rage on his people. The people are like the unloyal wife to an abusive, demanding husband that is, well, the God that they serve. Ezekiel chapter 16 makes this much clearer, I promise you. But all of this reminds me of a quote by the philosopher Seneca. He said that religion is true to the common people. It's regarded by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. That is why we see so many unjust deaths based on his minimal crimes in the Old Testament. No wise omnigod would condemn the deaths of thousands of innocent people. But a man, that's a different story, sir.
I think you just haven't found the truth yet. I think you've just missed the point.
Well, then whose fault is that? I found that this book called the Bible is one of the most difficult to follow books I've ever read. Reading through it and getting bored when I was young was enough for me to question the validity of it alone. If it was God truly communicating, then it would have been much more efficient. Besides, there are still many countries that don't have a copy of the Bible and instead have their own religion. Why would God even allow that? He just sits and watches as these disasters unfold, arms crossed? Why?
Within a room, there's a light, so that we may see what the room contains. For the room to be a place of purpose, the room must have something. Otherwise, it is an empty, meaningless room. Once there is something in the room, it casts a shadow because of the light. In this universe, if there is a light, there must be darkness. If we are blessed with the gift of light, then we must be plagued by the curse of darkness. Otherwise, we would know not the concept of either one. One must stand against the other. We don't know what we are missing until we see it for ourselves. This is why humanity wrestles with the concept of good and evil.
Well, of course, but this doesn't excuse the draw that there must be for an all-good force to be ready to defend us from evil of any kind.
But he defends us from evil. He sent his son to die for our sins, so that we can be safe from evil forever in heaven.
So you're saying that the ultimate God of the universe wanted to save humanity from a threat that his nature creates? So to do this, he chose the ancient Jewish desert wonders to write down his message on scrolls and then eventually reveal himself to the rest of us by doing things like turning water into wine, and while in the form of his own son, an ancient Jewish carpenter, who was eventually, as a matter of fact, sacrificed so that he could forgive you for not living up to standards that are impossible for you to live up to in the first place, so that you don't get tortured for all eternity.
So then what drives you to continue in life at all? Without a God, life is completely meaningless, and nothing tells you what is right or wrong, and it just seems that it just seems so selfish.
Mr. Fisher, my answer to that question, I've thought a lot about it, but I've come to the, maybe by your nature, unjust conclusion that this is what should be. In a world without God, we must then justify ourselves to the people we affect, our fellow human beings. And if we can't, then it is up to them to forgive us, rehabilitate us, make us pay restitution, and or punish us. We'd be at the mercy of very real, tangible consequences that don't rely upon the easily manipulated claims of what an unseen deity says or even thinks. Nor can we rely on the existence of an afterlife to provide us with justice. So we must therefore strive to create a just world within the here
and the now. Since that is what we try to do, maybe deep down we don't really believe. Maybe that's why we don't just abandon justice to a God in some unseen afterlife, but desperately try to seek justice in this life alone, before death. Maybe that's why we painfully grieve rather than rejoice when a loved one supposedly goes to heaven. Maybe that's why we think more about things like traffic and sports than the Bible, the literal divine message from the almighty creator of this universe. Maybe that's why we know more about our favorite TV show than what the literal creator of the universe supposedly wants us to know. Maybe we don't really fear God enough to stop us from doing bad things. Maybe our actions speak louder than our words, and we behave like God doesn't really exist because deep down, we don't really believe he does.
According to the Bible, Solomon was the wisest man who had ever lived. He turned away from God. And God speaks much wiser than Solomon or any of us can ever dream. Maybe that's why you don't understand.
If you want to know what God says, then just be quiet. Listen to the silence, the nothingness. Let it speak, and that's your answer. Why do you think there's no audible response after we pray?
All I know is that people need God. People need his love. It's our job as Christians to bring the kingdom of God on earth and to help as many people as we can.
Respectfully, sir, have you really? What about all the unanswered prayers? Was it by God's love that we see acts of terrorism today?
No, that's just evil people.
After the Allies liberated Europe in 1945, Nazi concentration camps were found, and the horrors which they preserved were left for all of the soldiers to see. They found the horrors of what each prisoner went through. On the inside of his cell was etched the sentence, "If there is a God, he will have to beg for my forgiveness."
It says in the Bible that being one of his will requires persecution. You know, it says in Matthew 5:11, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven."
But isn't it still a part of God's great and perfect plan? I wouldn't say so. If something good happens, it's by the glory of God. But if it's something horrible like the death of a loved one from cancer or even a shooting, it's simply God working in mysterious ways. If someone walked up to a woman dying from cancer and held out the miracle cure to her, only to take it back from her hand and throw it out, would that person be deemed as just being mysterious?
I do agree with you that bad things happen, whether we like it or not.
The human race is a liquid. We flow miraculously through time. The largest of fires cannot stop us. We adapt to whatever environment we're presented with as we take the shape of our container. Religion outdating would be no different.
I cannot already sway what you believe.
Neither can I to you. Then why would God allow belief to be his criteria for redemption?
Look, I don't understand all of the answers. And maybe someone in the church can. Won't you at least give that the benefit of the doubt? Besides, it is about faith, David, not necessarily about what you know. In the grand scheme of things, do any of us know anything?
Faith is torment. It's like loving someone who is out there in the darkness but never appears, no matter how loudly you call. You can't know things, let alone believe things, based on faith. It's not a virtue. Faith is not good criteria for belief at all.
I can't sway you.
And I can't sway you, no matter what I do. That's the strength of belief. Whenever we believe, truly we enhance our ego a little. Whenever someone insults our beliefs in some way, even just a little, we may feel attacked or some other strong emotion towards that notion. That is why God was so real to me for a long time. And as a matter of fact, is real to many people. He's in their ego. That is why Christians respond the way they do when you tell them that you don't believe.
No, God is real. You just need to wait and see, and you'll come around soon enough. And besides, if you don't, then you're throwing out all of this. I mean, look at all that out the window. There's no way he can't exist with an earth like that. I know it's not easy to go from one place to another, but I will stand by your decision. I should, like you said. I need to love no matter what, and I do love you no matter what. A lot of people miss that. And the funny thing is, that's the main message, that's the whole point. That's the most important part, Christian or not. We are all human beings, and we have to learn to exist together, no matter which one of us is correct, no matter what is truly out there.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Justine is out here. We need to take pictures.
Oh, all right. You can go on. I'll be there in a minute.
All right.
Please go with them. I'll catch up with you later, and we can talk about what we've missed and further compare answers.